Hi, we begin by taking a look at a few example programs that use external functions, which means that they import external functions or maybe even API functions. Let's start with ExitProcess.async. This is a pretty short program. Basically, all it does is to exit the process, as we can see here. However, the special thing about this program, at least as opposed to our previous programs, is that we don't have training.inc included here. Instead, we have this iData section. Let's try to understand what we see inside the iData section. First, let's see the properties of this section. It has the name iData, and the properties import, data, and readable. Then it contains a few interesting constructs, which are basically macros. These are not instructions. These are macros that direct the flat assembler FASM to create a few data constructs. The first construct is called library, and it allows us to choose files from which we want to import functions. In this example, we want to import functions from the file kernel32.dll. First, we declare which files we want, and next we specify which functions we want from every file. As an example, from kernel32.dll, we want to have the ExitProcess function. Some other comments about this short program. The first one, note that ExitProcess follows the std call convention. That is because the caller pushes arguments to the stack. However, the caller doesn't do this, add ESP4. It is the responsibility of the callee, which is here the ExitProcess function, to clean the stack, to clean the arguments from the stack. Another thing I want to talk about is this backslash. In FASM, we could use backslash to break a line. For example, if it is too long. We could, for example, use a backslash here. And this is going to have exactly the same effect as the original code. In this example, we could write something like this. However, usually you will see people write their code in this format. This is why I chose to write it in this format. Next, I want to talk about kernel32.dll. You might be wondering, what is this file? Or where is it? How come we cannot see this file? The truth is, we can see this file. Let me show you where can you find this file. I go to C, Windows, System32. Next, I look for kernel32.dll, and I can really find it here. Let me show you for a moment what is inside. This is kernel32.dll. We can see that it has the usual beginning of an executable file. For example, the beginning mz. It also contains the famous string, "This program cannot be run in DOS mode," which means that this is really just an executable file. The only difference is that kernel32.dll does not contain an entry point. Another thing about kernel32.dll. In the program, we can see that we use the function ExitProcess. Let's try to find this string inside kernel32.dll. I press Ctrl+F to search. Next I pick text string and I'm going to search ExitProcess. Basically, I'm going to search this sequence of hex values, which is equivalent to the ASCII representation of this string. Let's search. I found one result, which is here, ExitProcess. We can see that at this part of the file, we have a large list of function names. Those are all functions inside kernel32.dll. We can see, for example, exit thread, or maybe escape com function. We can also see that the names are ordered alphabetically. We got here E, and then after some time we get to F here, fatal up exit A. This is about kernel32.dll. Next, I want to discuss the ExitProcess function, or maybe how to get more information about this function. Assume that you just see this program and you wonder, how does ExitProcess work? What is this argument? Or maybe, what does this function do? In order to find out, we can use msdn.com, which has the documentation for the Windows API. Let's open our browser. And next we open msdn.com. We can see here the MSDN website. One thing that you should know about the MSDN website is that it is really full of valuable information. However, at the same time, it contains a lot of fluff. You have to be focused when you use this website. In my opinion, the most useful feature inside this website is the search box. Let's use the search box to search for ExitProcess. We got a few results. Note that you might get results for a few different platforms. For example, here we can see ExitProcess function for Windows and also for Windows CE 5. Here we can also see some kind of a C++ version of ExitProcess. If you are using assembly language, always try to find the most basic version of the function, the API version, because this is probably the version in which you are going to use. In our case, this would be a good choice. Now I got a page with a description of the ExitProcess function. It begins with the syntax of this function. Usually the syntax will be C++ or C style. Don't be intimidated by this. We already know the order of the arguments and how the order translates into pushes. Let me explain the syntax. Here we can see the name of the function, and inside the braces we are going to have arguments. In this case, we have only one argument. In means that this argument is about input. There are arguments, for example, in which you get output. There are some functions where which you can supply a pointer to some location, and then the function will give the result at this address in memory. But this is not the case here. Here the function only takes input. It also says the type of the input, which is unsigned integer, uint. And next we have the name of the argument. It is called uExitCode. In many cases, you can guess many things about the function only by looking at the syntax. In some other cases, you might want to read more to make sure that you understand the syntax and how the function works. We have here the parameters section, which is about explaining every parameter for the function. Here the function has only one parameter, uExitCode, and here's the explanation for this parameter. The exit code for the process and all threads. Return value. The return value section contains the value which returns inside EAX from this function. In this case, it says that this function does not return a value. Basically, exiting a process could be a kind of a deep subject. We haven't learned much about processes and threads and how programs really run inside the system. This is a bit outside of the scope of this course. But I just wanted to mention that there is some depth for those ideas. Therefore, there is some big description here of what happens when you use this function, the ExitProcess function. Basically, I just want to note that this argument is some kind of exit code. If some other program launches your program, it can find out whether your program succeeded or failed, for example, using this exit code. So for example, maybe if our program failed in some way, we could give a different exit code to indicate failure. In our program, we just give the value 0 to the ExitProcess function, which means that the exit code is just 0. Some other information that we can extract. Usually there is a section with examples. Here we have a bit of a strange example, and I'm not going to show it right now, but sometimes examples could be really useful. The examples are usually going to be in the C language, but it will not take much effort to translate them into assembly. Next, there is the requirements section. It will tell you which version of Windows is needed for the specified function. And it will also tell you inside which file this function resides. In this example, it is kernel32.dll. This row is really useful. Many times you will just want to know inside which file you can find a specific function. Usually you could also find a few other related functions. And this could be really useful if you don't know all the API functions. You could just traverse from one API function to another to gain more knowledge about a specific subject in the operation system. Here, for example, we also have exit thread, which might be interesting. And maybe also create process, which is probably the opposite of exit process. It allows us to create a new process. After we have this information about the exit process function, let's try to change it a bit. Maybe return a different number. We don't expect it to have much evident effect because we don't really use the exit code anywhere. However, just for the fun, let's change the exit code to another number, maybe 2. We save the program, and next let's assemble and run this program. It doesn't really do much, but it doesn't rely on training.inc. It might be our really first independent program. I want to discuss MSDN a bit more. Let's say that you want some kind of an index of the API functions. Maybe you want a list of the API functions so you can learn a little bit at a time, maybe by subjects. If you want to find such a list, I recommend you to search for API index. As we can see, the search is a bit refined at this point, and we don't want this, so we click remove all. And now we get this page, API index. There is also another page called Windows API index. I see that it has higher rating, so I will just click this one. Here we have an index of the Windows API functions. As we can see, the functions are divided into different subjects: user interface, Windows environment, user input and messaging, and so on. You could just click on one of those subjects, maybe for example buttons, and you can see different functions, different API functions. If you wanted, you can even get an offline version of MSDN. You could probably get it from the SDK package. If you remember, we used the SDK package to install WinDBG. You just have to check some box to get it. Then, even if you don't have direct internet connection from your computer, you can still search the documentation and read it. In the following examples, I'm going to use the online versions, which means that I assume that you do have internet connection. Summary of this lesson. We have seen the exit process program, and it was probably the first program that we wrote that did not rely on training.inc. Basically, it just exited the process. We've also seen how to search MSDN and how to get more information about the exit process function. Finally, we saw how to get an index of all the API functions inside the MSDN documentation.